All right, welcome ladies and gentlemen. How are all doing today? Or tonight, depends when you're watching this video. What I want to share with you is, how do you know that this would be a good cup of coffee? You're going to assess it. Well, is it good? Is it effective? What does it look like? Etc. Well, same with your students. How are you going to assess, are your students learning? How do you know? Because we don't have good insights. We got to have some kind of data. And so this is on this video, we want to share with you what assessment is. The down and dirty version in a couple of minutes of what you need to know about assessment, because these have great implications. And again, the concepts I'm going to introduce to you here today can be further explored in the course and also in your program at your campus, etc. But I wanted to kind of make you aware today that what assessment is in a broad scope of things. So behind me, with putting my coffee down, behind me I have here a notion of assessment. So what is assessment? We hear this word all the time in higher ed, assessment. A lot of people don't even know what it is. Is assessment a test, or is assessment something else? Is it an essay? Is it a rubric? What is it? I don't know. Here's what it really is. Assessment, I'm going to write here, is a process. What is it a process of? It's a process of teaching, learning, and did something behavior change based on that? Because another axiom is, remember, teaching without learning is talking. So you need to assess, was teaching effective? Where are my students learning? Because again, we're trying to impart knowledge with them. They're trying to discover it. How do we know? So we need some kind of a measurement that says, here's the student learning. So what else is student? So again, measuring student learning and effectiveness is what assessment's about. Also very important, the third element is it provides evidence. So if you're in a program that has accreditation, like in allied health, they're going to need to know assessment is evidence. So test scores evidence. You can have an essay as evidence. If there's a rubric attached, and there's great websites that you can make up your own rubric. So rubrics are a great way to demonstrate effectiveness. So again, it also deals with, and I'm going to write up another word here, is evidence and mastery. So did people master the objective? So again, assessment are usually those three things. It's a process, it's a measurement of student learning and the effectiveness of how, as educators, do we get students to learn things. And also it provides evidence of what? Mastery of the objective. So assessment is tied exactly to curriculum via objectives. So assessment needs to be related to the curriculum. So again, assessment is important. How important is assessment? If you're in an allied health program, it's as important as taking blood or understanding how to help people during surgery, because again, assessment could kill students. Again, poor assessments equal poor grades. And again, the students may know the concepts, but again, if the assessment was not built correctly, then that information is lost. So again, we have to make sure that how the assessment item is built is also equally as important as giving it. What do I mean by that? Well, here, assessment is, you can be broken down assessment into three categories. One is the tool itself. What is the tool? Well, the tool is the test instrument. So again, the test instrument itself is important. How it's built makes a difference. A lot of times people overlook how it's built. Going to a test bank is not necessarily effective because the questions themselves are geared towards the textbook and not geared towards concepts. And again, they may have poorly written test questions. Somebody that's far removed from your class are making these questions up and may or may not have anything to do with how and why you taught the class in a certain way. So test bank questions may be all low level. That's not a good way to measure student learning, is by giving 100-item test bank questions that have nothing to do with anything. So I encourage you, not encourage you, but duty demands it that you become a quality control manager for looking at test bank questions if you want to use them. Now, caveat with test bank questions. You want to know how to rework test bank questions to meet your classroom setting. So, test item, the test instrument itself is step one. What is it? How was it made? Second part is measurement. Measurement, we hear this word a lot, measurement. Well, what is the measurement? Measurement is the score that the student got. So if it was 100 questions and the student got 80 correct, that's an 80%. That under the new grading scale, that would be a B, a B minus. So again, score would be the composite score usually of the student test. Usually number correct over number of total, and you divide that, you get a percent. So score is the percent mark. Now, think of this also as an indication of how the test item was built. So again, score relates to the test instrument. Now, let's say, for example, you have a benchmark. Let's say benchmark for passing in your class, I don't know, was a 69. Well, the student got a 70. Okay, they passed the test, but let's say they got a 50. Well, what do? Well, that's not good. Well, when you say that's not good, that's a judgment. In testing lingo, that's known as the evaluation. So the third part of all of this process is based on the second part. Score implies evaluation. Evaluation of what? Performance of the student's scores. If a high number of people failed in an exam, you have to make a judgment call. Well, the judgment is, well, I had 60% get 50% on my test. So 6 out of my 10 students got below the benchmark. What are you going to do? Well, blame the students? Well, they didn't study. That's very teacher-centered and very diffusal of responsibility. More accurate answer would be, let me look at my test and how it's built. Let me see exactly what was asked. So evaluation is going to go back to the process and then redo things. Maybe reteach the things, looking at extra credit, etc. Doing something as a result of the score versus the benchmark. Where do you think people should be? If they're below it, you're going to judge it. Or even if people passed it, reevaluate. So this is part of what we call Kaizen, continuous improvement. So you see, assessment relates to a plan. The assessment plan is almost like if you're having a flight plan, if you're a pilot, you need to know where you're flying a plane to. So next time you go on an airplane, hopefully your pilot has a flight plan. If not, I would get off the plane. Next time you go across a bridge and you're driving and you go across a bridge, hopefully the engineers who built that had a blueprint of how that bridge was designed. If you're going to formulate a business, hopefully you have a business plan. If you're in a hospital and you have a care, hopefully you have a care plan that your doctor and nurses put together. What's the correlation? Because they're all about assessment. What makes a person in the classroom any different? I need to have an assessment plan. I need to know where I'm going with my students. It's no different than I'm flying an airplane. You need to have a plan for your class. How am I going to assess? So this whole process deals with that. So again, tool, let me put it another way. Think if you're going to take a temperature with a patient. If you're in an allied health program, you have to take temperature because you look a little flush. You use a thermometer. Thermometer is the instrument. You get a score, you get a measurement, you get a temperature, 102. You do an evaluation, take 2 aspirin or Tylenol and hopefully the fever is reduced. Same concept, but now what if I take my thermometer and I throw it on the table really hard and throw it on the floor? Is that instrument compromised? Most likely, yes. That's if the test is built incorrectly based on stuff from a test bank, then the questionable test item remains. Was the test valid? So, with that, we have 2 types of assessment. What I'm describing right now in full is more geared towards what's called summative. Summative, you may have heard this word. Summative usually is time-related, like a midterm or a final exam. Those are endpoints. So summative is at the end of a program. So if you have a midpoint of your class or a final exam, those are usually those type of exams. Now, the big difference with assessment here is this. We have to, as I'm describing, we have to make sure that those type of tests, midterm and final, are valid. That's what needs to happen. Validity. As I described, you need to know a blueprint. Next time you go over a bridge, if the blueprint wasn't there, then the bridge may be not necessarily able to hold all the weight it goes through. Just like a test. Test has to be valid. It has to be valid. What does valid mean? It means that did the test accomplish its objectives? Did you teach and test what was taught? So that's going to be a big factor. So how the instrument describes what was tested. So if you talked about one topic on Thursday and have 10 questions on that on next Friday's midterm, then that's not valid. Because again, it has to be proportion of how the class was taught. That's a big thing. So validity is about what can we infer from this test. So if your questions don't have nothing to do with the class, then that's going to be a questionable exam as well. So for example, we want you to blueprint, and I'll talk about blueprinting here in a second, and there's a lot of good websites on how to blueprint, but again, we're moving in that direction of blueprinting. Some programs such as nursing and OTA already have to do this for their accreditation. But if you're not in those programs, it is an effective practice of what effective educators do, should blueprint a test, especially for a midterm or final. So again, what the old axiom is, do not test high, but teach low. So people are teaching all down here covering material, as the last video talked about, covering is not a good word. It's more of an ineffective word. So we're covering and going through, and all of a sudden it comes to the test time, we have all these questions that are all high level, but the students were not engaged in high level material. How do you expect them to understand at the high level when the classroom was not about that? For example, if I'm teaching a class on something, and I go, well, you know what, in the class says 2 plus 2 is 4. Homework. 6 minus 2 is 4. It comes to the test. Jill has 2 apples. Jack has 2 apples. Now calculate the mass of the sun. Where's that come from? But that's what happens when a lot of times people do things that have nothing to do with anything. So because of that, and again, think like a teacher, not as a professional in your field, you have to do these things because that's what's required for effective educators. Blueprinting, making things proportional. Try not to test high and then teach down here. Catch yourself trying to do that because that's a big factor. So what do? Blueprint helps you kind of get that in proportion. Well, what is blueprinting? Blueprinting is taking all your objectives and making a grid. Very easy to do, and you can do this all the time. Again, remember, if you don't blueprint, next time you go on a bridge, see if the engineer didn't have a blueprint for that bridge, or next time you're in a building, there was no blueprint, let me know if you want to step in that building. So again, your objectives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. What are the objectives for the class? These are the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So, first one, low level, knowledge. Maybe comprehension and application. We'll do 3. So again, what do? Well, this objective was really important in class, so I'm going to have 2 multiple choice questions at the knowledge level. Okay, fine, definitional, etc. But I'm also going to have 2 multiple choice, MC, at the application level because we did some cool assignments that allowed the students to apply what we did on Objective 1. Okay, I have 4 questions based on that objective. Objective 2, I'm going to have about 6 multiple choice at the comprehension level because we did some good work in the class. I had them write an essay on that objective that had related to that. And I'm also going to have about 2 application questions. So I'm going to have 8 questions for Objective 2, multiple choice. Objective 3, I'm going to have 1 multiple choice at the low end, about 4 more multiple choice here, and I'm going to have 5 more multiple choice here, and maybe one short essay, fill in a spot. So I'm going to have 11 questions on Objective 3. So again, this way it's proportioned to how I taught the class. This is blueprinting. And again, this is not written in stone, but again, a good practice says that this should be done prior to actually teaching a class. So you know where you want the class to go, just like a blueprint is done before they build the building. You can't blueprint a building after it's built because that's pointless and hopefully the building's built correctly. Same with your test. You have to blueprint it before you actually build it. And again, this comes with habit. So if you think in terms of other professions where they have to do these things, it's just common sense nature. Same thing with education. You have to blueprint a good test in order for it to be valid and to be an effective test. Because if not, the results are questionable and students can question you on, well, is the test valid? And that's the first thing people are going to ask. Was it valid? Just because you made it, it's not an event. It's a process. The test itself, well, I built the test, that does not mean that the test was valid because it was built. It has to go through certain rigor, and this is one of them, and most people will look for that. Now, also, what can you do to help your test? Well, one way is when you write out a question, write the objective in there as well. So what does the objective say? So objective 1, question 1. This way you can link your objectives with each one of your questions on your midterm. How long should a midterm be? No more than 50 to 70 questions. If you have more, you're overkilling it. So again, between 50 and 70, 100 max, but again, 70 is good if you want to have a good, effective test. I would argue 50 to 70, and that would be all you really would need to see a sample of what the students actually need to know in the classroom. So again, blueprinting. One other point before we move on to our other topic is multiple choice and short essay are good for critical thinking. What's not good for critical thinking? True and false, matching, and fill in the blank. Those are for recall. So if your midterm has a lot of true and false in it, or fill in the blank, or matching, try to reduce those, because those themselves were great for a daily quiz, because they're designed by nature for recall. They're not designed for critical thinking. So again, try not to use a lot of these types of format, because the nature itself implies that they're not. So it's like saying that there is no such thing as a round square. There isn't. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about is formative assessment. Formative assessment is known as classroom assessment techniques. And that's what we want to do every day. Let me demonstrate for you. Let's say I'm hungry now because it's about 3 o'clock and it's good time for lunch. So I'm hungry. So I go to my favorite restaurant. I'm going to go eat. And guess what I'm going to order? My favorite thing is soup. I'm in a mood for soup, a big bowl of soup. And maybe you are too. So you go to your favorite restaurant and you're in the mood for soup. We're all excited about soup. I like broccoli and cheese. It's really tasty. It's awesome. It's also fatty, but it's good too. So we're all excited for soup. And maybe you're going to go to your favorite restaurant for soup too. We can't wait. We get the soup. We go in the store. We order it. Hey, I want some soup. It comes to my table. It's awesome. It smells delicious. It's great. I can't wait to dive into my soup. What am I building up? Expectations. I'm expecting a great bowl of soup, and so are you. So you sit down, you're going to be talking with your neighbors, your friends, etc. at the table, sharing experiences, drinking your drink. I can't wait to have my coffee and soup. That's awesome. I can't wait. So I get my little plastic spoon. I'm going to dive into my soup, and I can't wait to taste it. It smells awesome, and I can't wait to do it. And I take a bite of it, and I'm like, ugh, disgusting, because it tastes like feet and dirty socks and soap. And I'm going to go, how do I feel? I feel horrible. I feel disappointed, frustrated, because I just ordered this. I couldn't wait all day. And I'm like, oh, now it's disgusting, and I got a mess on the table. I just spit it out. How would you feel, too, if you got that type of soup that smells like, tastes like dirty feet, socks, and soap? And how would you feel? You would feel horrible. Well, here's my point. What should have happened before the soup came to me from the restaurant? What do you think should have happened? I would assume they should have tasted it or had some kind of quality control before the soup got to me, the patron customer. Think of the same thing with your students. Your classroom is like a big bowl of soup. You need to periodically taste it to see how they're doing before the summative midterm and final exam. How do you do that? Formative assessments. Formative assessments is this ongoing, everyday type of assessment to see how your big bowl of soup is doing of a classroom. So, think of soup when you think formative. Classroom assessment techniques. When to do them? Every day. Do some kinds of assessment, and there's great websites. You can look in the classroom for those. On classroom assessment technique, just Google this and you'll find all kinds of different things, such as the muddiest point. The muddiest point. What are the students, what have you learned? Those kind of things. Have the students write a poem. Have them reflect every day. doing something where the students are engaged every day, almost at the end of a lesson, so that this they can use formatively, that it's very quick. You can see how the students are learning in your class. Did they get the concept or not? But we call this a twofer because it's good for the students to see how they're doing, but it's also good for you, the instructor, to see how you're doing and where you need to adjust your teaching and learning aspects. So again, if the students have that glazed look and they don't have no idea what they're doing, but if you're interested in believing like the other video I indicated, if your belief is I got to cover everything and you're going like a bullet train through material and not stopping periodically, you're going to get a big bowl of soup that's disgusting when it comes time for your midterm and then blame the students that why didn't you learn anything. So again, to avoid all of that, formative assessments can help you out. And they're very low entryway. That means that they don't take a lot of effort to actually do, and there's 100 different things that you can do. Have the students write an essay, have the students write a poem, have the students write a rap song, have the students engage in a little skit, some kind of problem solving, think, pair, and share. You can have them do a one-sentence summary. You have them do a one-sentence summary. You can have them do a one-minute paper. So all these things about reflecting on what did they learn, that makes it where it's contextualized, it then becomes relative to them, and they can turn it into you. You can make it for a grade, but again, make it a habit, because this will then get great feedback every day to see what people are or are not before they get to the midterm or final. Because midterms or final are that. It's too late to do, you can't unring that bell. That's what happens with the bowl of soup. If the soup persons didn't do that, now what's my view of the restaurant? I don't like it, I'm not going to go there again, it's terrible. I'm going to have this negative thought in my head. Or I'm not going to go there, I don't like it, this is horrible. Same with your students. I studied all the time, I thought I did well. They get to the midterm, it's terrible. What happened on Tuesday of this week that people should be testing every day? So think of Tuesday before your midterm on Friday, so that you can assess every day. So again, just to clarify and summarize, formative assessments every day. And there's 100 different things that you can utilize daily that would help your students become more effective learners, and they're good for you to see what you can do so you don't end up with a big bowl of rotten soup that you thought was awesome. Because again, hey, your student's doing it, I think they're doing well. They come to the midterm, hey, I got like half the class failed. Well, that's because they didn't study and they should have been in this program, and you blame admissions. Well, don't do that. What can we do as instructors? Well, we can start implementing formative assessments. The other thing we can do, start to actually blueprint our exams. Make sure that they're valid and actually reliable, and that we actually blueprint them, and we're not teaching low or we're not testing high. So again, assessment is part of the triumvirate. What do I mean? Teaching, learning, assessment, and that's it to get the triangle. So again, you have the whole big triangle: teaching, learning, assessment. And that's related to, and you can put curriculum probably in the middle. So we're teaching and learning about curriculum, we're also assessing its effectiveness. So again, it's this whole big three things: teaching, curriculum, learning, assessment, they're all interrelated. So again, what do we need to know from this video? Assessment's a process and it provides evidence. Summative deals with final exam, midterm, should be blueprinted, should be proportional. A lot of good websites. If you go to Authentic Assessment Toolbox, you'll see how to do that. And I'm sure your TLC can help you out with looking at blueprinting. And again, formative assessments, think of soup, and think of that should be done daily. And again, it's to see how both you and the students are doing on an everyday occurrence, because it provides good feedback, which is needed in making those daily classroom improvements. So again, thank you for your time, and enjoy your soup.